You say yes before you even know what you're agreeing to. You smile when your chest tightens. You nod when everything inside you is screaming, no. And you call it kindness. They call it maturity. Society calls it being well-adjusted. But let's pause here. Let's ask the question that cuts deeper than comfort. Are you actually kind or just expertly trained to avoid rejection? This isn't a personality flaw. It's not about being too nice. It's about programming. From the moment you were praised for being easy, from the moment your silence earned applause, you learned that safety comes from approval, not truth. And every time you said yes, just to keep the peace, you reinforced the reflex. A reflex to shrink, to please, to disappear behind a smile. But here's the truth. No one told you. This isn't self-help. This is nervous system warfare. Because what you call your personality might actually be a defense system built from guilt, fear, and performance. So, if you've ever walked away from a conversation and felt that heavy pit in your stomach, if you've ever said yes while your whole body screamed no, you're in the right place. This video is not about becoming more assertive. It's about unlearning what was never truly yours. Not through force, but through cold, strategic refusal. Let's begin. They didn't have to force you. They didn't have to raise their voice. They just had to reward your obedience. Every time you stayed quiet, you were told you were well-behaved. Every time you gave in without protest, they smiled. And you felt safe. That's how training works. Not through pain, but through praise. And so you learned, saying yes keeps the peace. Saying no creates tension. And peace, to a nervous system shaped by survival, feels like love. That's the trick. You began saying yes, not because you meant it, but because it made others feel better. Because it kept you out of trouble. Because it bought you approval. This is reflex compliance. It happens in a split second. Before your brain forms a clear thought, your body has already agreed. Your mouth says, sure, while your stomach tightens. You smile. Even when you're angry. You say it's okay. Even when it's not. You offer help when you're already exhausted. And the world claps for you. They call you mature, adaptable, a good listener. But what they're really saying is, thank you for not making me uncomfortable. They like that you're easy to control. They won't say it out loud. But deep down, they know. Because you've become predictable. You agree. You bend. You adapt. And they don't even have to ask anymore, because your reflex is faster than their manipulation. You've become so good at complying, you don't even need pressure. You pressure yourself. This is no longer a decision. It's an autopilot. And here's the most chilling part. You call it your personality. You call it being kind. You think it's just who you are. But it's not. It's who you became to survive approval addiction. Let that sink in. The need to be liked. The fear of being called too much. The exhaustion from holding back what you really think. These aren't your flaws. They're your reflexes. And if you don't become aware of them, someone else will use them. Because manipulation doesn't need to scream. It just needs to wait until you perform the role they trained you for. So the next time you feel that knee-jerk yes rising in your throat, ask yourself, who trained this response into me? And more importantly, do I still need it? Let's go deeper. You didn't say yes. Your guilt did. And that's the most powerful manipulation of all, the kind that doesn't come from pressure, but from within. They don't need to threaten you. They just need to hint. A pause, a sigh, a loaded. It's just 5 minutes. And instantly you fold, because they've trained your nervous system to mistake guilt for morality. You're not responding from clarity. You're reacting from programming. Guilt becomes the leash. Obligation becomes the cage. And you decorate it with words like being helpful, being supportive, being a good person. But let's be honest, you said yes because you couldn't stand the weight of being perceived as selfish. Not because you actually wanted to. Here's what they never told you. True boundaries aren't built with words. They're enforced in silence. It's not about saying no louder. It's about saying nothing and letting the discomfort fall where it belongs, on the person trying to invade your space. Because guilt is a map. It shows you where your old programming still runs. It says, if I don't respond, they'll think I'm cold. If I say no, they'll be disappointed. If I don't help, they'll suffer. But ask yourself, who taught you that someone else's comfort is more important than your clarity? Who taught you that sacrifice equals love? Most guilt you carry isn't yours. It was handed to you by people who benefited when you didn't question it. And now you flinch at the idea of stillness. You panic when you pause, because somewhere in you, no, still feels like betrayal. That's the trap. You don't need force to be controlled. You just need guilt in the right tone. The phrase just 5 minutes isn't a request. It's a test. Not of your kindness, but of your programming. And every time you obey guilt, you reinforce it. But here's the shift. The moment you pause and observe that guilt, instead of reacting to it, you break the spell. You reclaim authority. Subconscious refusal isn't loud. It's not dramatic. It's quiet, cold, clear. You let the silence speak for you, and that silence says, I'm no longer available for manipulation, no matter how polite it sounds. Let's keep going. Let me ask you something. How many times have you said yes, not because you wanted to, but because silence felt too loud? We're trained to fill the gap, to answer immediately, to make others comfortable, even when it costs us clarity, peace, or dignity. But power, real power, doesn't respond on demand. It waits. It watches. It lets others squirm in the space they tried to control. Because silence isn't a retreat. It's a recalibration. When you speak too soon, you give away your frame. You react instead of observe. You defend when no one has even fired. But when you say nothing, you flip the script. Let's break this down. Silence is not empty. It's full of tension, of pressure, of control. It forces the other person to keep talking, to reveal their intent, to expose their assumptions. You ever noticed how manipulative people hate silence because it doesn't give them anything to grab? No opening, no angle, no compliance. They ask, so, you're not gonna say anything, and you just look at them. No nod, no fake smile, just presence, just stillness. You've now taken control of the tempo. And in power dynamics, tempo is everything. The fast one gets trapped in the emotions. The slow one sets the terms. That's why we teach this. Train the 3-second pause. Before you say yes. Before you explain. Before you apologize. Stop. Breathe. Feel the pull to comply. And let it pass. Because if you can pause for 3 seconds, you'll hear something rare. Your real answer. That answer isn't polite. It isn't soft. It isn't scared. It's clean. Decisive. Unapologetic. It doesn't sound like, maybe. It sounds like silence. And that silence is more powerful than any excuse you could ever offer. Here's the truth. You don't owe anyone an instant reply. You don't owe them comfort. You don't owe them access to your nervous system. You owe yourself clarity. And clarity begins where performance ends. So next time they ask, "Why are you so quiet?" smile, not to please, but because you know they just lost control of the script. Silence was never weakness. You were just trained to fear it. But now you can use it. Like a shield. Like a mirror. Like a blade. Let's keep going. Let's start with something simple. A moment from your past week. Think about a time you said yes. Even though something in you resisted. Maybe it was small. A favor you didn't want to do. A conversation you didn't feel ready for. An agreement that didn't come from truth, but from fear. Now pause and realize that yes wasn't a choice. It was a reflex. Because at some point in your life, your nervous system learned safety equals saying yes. Love equals compliance. Peace, avoiding conflict. And so now, when pressure arrives, you perform, smile, agree, so fast. Your logic can't even interrupt. This part of you doesn't need motivation. It needs retraining. Here's how. Step 1. Name the reflex. Write down 3 moments, recent ones, when you agreed too quickly, even if they seem small, because reflexes live in the small, not the big. Example. You offered to help, but you were exhausted. You answered a text when you needed silence. You said, "Sure," when you wanted to scream. Now write the real truth, not the story. The instinct. I didn't want to. I felt pushed. I wasn't ready. Own it. That's your raw material. Step 2. Rescript the response. Take those 3 scenarios and rewrite the reaction the way your authentic nervous system would respond if it wasn't trained for performance. Short, direct, unapologetic. Examples. No thanks. I'm not available. I'll think about it and get back to you. I'm taking space right now. No over-explaining. No softening. No smiley face at the end of the sentence. Just presence. Just clarity. Step 3. Anchor it in the body. Because belief lives in the nervous system, not the intellect. So now you practice. Say the rewritten response out loud, but not like a script. Like a command. Drop your shoulders. Breathe slowly. Feel your feet. Make eye contact, even if no one's in the room. Because refusal isn't about words. It's about posture, tone, energy, Most people try to set boundaries with language, but the real power is in stillness. That 1 second where you pause and refuse to flinch. Presence equals boundary. That's the law. And the next time someone asks you for something, your nervous system will remember. It won't rush. It won't scramble to protect the peace. It will pause, hold, choose, because that's what sovereignty sounds like. It's not loud. It's not defensive. It's quiet. And it doesn't ask for permission. So don't just know this. Train it. Daily. Refuse softly, but refuse fully, without guilt, without explanation, without breaking eye contact. Because that's the moment they realize they're not speaking to the trained version of you anymore. They're speaking to the real one. And he doesn't perform. You don't need another script. You need a new law. One that doesn't ask for approval. One that isn't written by fear. Let's begin with a declaration. Say it quietly, but say it like it rewrites your nervous system. My time is not owed. Not because you're cold, but because you're sovereign. My silence does not mean permission. You're not avoiding conflict. You're controlling the frame. Let's be honest. You weren't born compliant. You were trained to be. With every be polite. With every don't make things awkward. With every just say yes. It's easier. So you adapted. Smiled. Softened your tone. Dulled your edges. Until your truth became something you whispered only to yourself, never out loud. But here's the truth no one wants to say. They didn't love you. They loved the version of you that was easy to manage, easy to read, easy to bend. That's not love. That's emotional convenience. And the moment you stop apologizing for your truth, they'll panic. Why? Because your new identity isn't predictable. It doesn't need to justify. It doesn't ask, is this okay with you? It simply acts. It decides. It moves. That's what makes people uncomfortable. Not anger, not rejection, but clarity. Quiet, non-negotiable energy. Here's the shift. You're not just saying no anymore. You're becoming someone who doesn't need to explain the yes or the no. That's identity. Not words. Not posture. Not power plays. Just presence. And when you walk into a room, you don't need to perform. You don't need to manage how others see you. You just take up space. Fully. Without apology. This is your identity upgrade. It doesn't come from force. It comes from detachment. You're not rebelling. You're reclaiming. The version of you who said yes to avoid tension, he's done. The new version, he says less, means more, and watches people adjust to him instead of adjusting to survive. So when they say, "You've changed," you nod and say nothing, because they're right. Let's end this with a truth you've always known, but maybe never said aloud. You weren't born saying yes. You learned it. You rehearsed it. You practiced it until it felt like you. But here's the twist, that part of you wasn't born. It was installed. Installed by people who needed you, small. Installed by moments where safety meant silence. Installed by smiles you forced, just to stay accepted. So, here's your exit. Write down one reflex you're ready to remove. That automatic yes. That fake laugh. That guilty pause. Then write down one response you'll give next time. Short, clear, unapologetic. No more rehearsing approval. No more protecting their comfort at the cost of your clarity. And next time someone looks at you confused, next time they say, "Wait, why are you being like this?" you don't flinch. You don't shrink. You don't explain. You just breathe and hold the line. Because you didn't choose the first version of you, but you do choose the final one. So choose this clarity over guilt, presence over performance, command over compliance. They installed the fear, but you uninstall it. You were trained, but now you command.